the senior troop of Lifelong. I'm so happy to be here with Leigh and Yvonne to share our writing. We thank Robin and the Community Arts Partnership for inviting us to this Spring Rights event. We will be reading individual work, and then we're going to read the play I wrote about abortion. The three of us will read that. But first we'll be reading individual work. And on the bench or table over there are copies of Beats and Beats Living and Dying with Hospice, and you'll understand why they're there. And feel free to take one, they're free. So, Leigh, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Leigh Keeley. Is that it?
Yes, introduce who you are.
I'm Leigh Keeley. I never thought of myself as a writer, but I'm in a writing group for 6 years, more than 6 years now, and so somehow that's given me the courage to get up and read things I wrote, so here I am.
Oh, I have the mic. Hi, I'm Yvonne Fisher. Is that too loud? Okay. And I've been writing for many years and performing for many years, and I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm happy to be here. And I love Spring Rights, and I love Ithaca, and that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, I'm first. I'm just going to read two little pieces that I wrote. The first one, in the writing group, the task was write the voice of someone or something else. So this is in the voice of a cat, my cat. It's called A Life Well Lived. There was a dream I used to have, or was it a memory, of a wide field with long grass. I am resting in the fallen needles of an aging fir tree when I catch sight of a small-eared, bushy-tailed beast scratching heedlessly at the earth in the afternoon sun, pulling out a nut, scampering up a tree. All my senses awaken, muscles tensed. I watch the beast return to the ground. I crouch low in the grass, move cautiously, step by silent step. Hidden by trees along the side of the field, I stalk the furry fellow, then strike while his gaze is turned away. He's mine, unable to resist the grip of my teeth on the back of his neck. I run to the porch, where she sits reading her book, certain of praise for the gift I am bringing. "Drop that squirrel!" she shouts. Startled, I run past the house to the sheltered overhang of the mock orange leaves, open my mouth, and release the beast. Whenever I awoke from the dream, I would know I was in the little blue bed she bought for me so long ago, when I was a feisty young cat, living alone, distrustful of humans, but drawn to her, venturing through her open door that first time to spray my scent, to mark the place as my own. She understood my need for freedom, but insisted on whispering, "Stay safe," before I could leave the house. Called my name frantically whenever I spent the night exploring neighborhood haunts. Hugged the breath out of me when I returned home. When we moved to a new place, there were smells I couldn't recognize, more rooms to explore, and a dirt-floored basement perfumed with the lingering odor of cats I'd never met. The perfect place for bodily waste, I thought, till she provided that handful of litter. I was content to lie by the heating vent behind the bookcase on cold days, to snack on greenies and take cat naps in the little blue bed. Life was good, even as my legs grew weak. Food smelled enticing, but I couldn't eat. I knew long before she did that my time was coming to an end, but couldn't speak of the aching bones, the churning stomach. Couldn't tell her that the constant pissing was painful. One day, sitting next to me on the sofa, Stroking my roughened, clumped fur, she said, "I love you, little one. Please don't die. Not yet." I heard her on the phone. "How will I know when it's time?" I heard her cry as she lifted me into the crate. I heard another voice say, "It's a kindness." I wanted to tell her it was fine, that I had had a good life. I wanted to thank her for everything, but could only stare with my dim green eyes and hope she understood as she held me tight and the needle went in and I said goodbye. Is it too noisy with this microphone?
It's perfect.
No. Is it, okay, good, okay, everybody, yeah. Okay, this is called boxes. In this oddly constructed house, a wood plank ladder leads from the narrow, cramped space of the so-called third bedroom to the attic, where in the haste of moving, I have thrown here and there a few sealed boxes, the contents long forgotten, gathering dust for 14 years, patiently waiting to be reopened. I go to the attic only in spring to open the windows at each end of the space, urging soft breezes to cleanse the stuffy air lingering after the winter cold. I should go through those boxes, I have mused, each spring. Then, no, not yet. But someday, one day, finally, nostalgic enough, strong enough to face the past, I drag the boxes down the wooden ladder with great care, cautiously cut the tape. Inside, neatly layered, were old letters from as far back as college, in handwriting instantly familiar. Letters from Gary in a cheerfully roofed script, from my brother in his left-handed scrawl, one note from my mother, chicken scratches in bright fountain pen blue, and the sweetest surprise, a postcard in my father's distinctively masculine hand, the capital letters large and insistent. "There is a rumor around that you've been drunk for most of your classes and have needed help getting in and out of the dorms," quipped my brother in 1963. "I certainly hope you aren't letting this boy take serious advantage of you in your drunken condition," he said, referring to a recent letter in which I told him about my new boyfriend. I wasn't drunk, by the way. That was his idea of humor. Okay. And this from my first great love, Gary, in 1966. "When you write, include your grades. I want to see how much damage I've done. Take care of yourself and take care of our love." The relationship ran its course. 15 years later, I received a letter from Gary's wife, who had discovered my name in his address book. She wrote to tell me that Gary had committed suicide by jumping from the window of their 5th floor apartment in Manhattan. My father sent this card from Sweden in 1970. "There are lots of Swedish blonde girls eyeing me at every turn, all lovely, but mother is watching me like a hawk." He died of a heart attack 3 years later at the age of 52. I had saved only one note from my mother, written in 1992 after a long estrangement. "Leigh, dear, I want you to know that I miss having you as a part of my life. I have never for a moment stopped loving you since December 29, 1944. Now, only my brother remains alive, his health fragile, the bursts of adolescent humor almost non-existent. He never sends letters, only emails. No left-handed scroll involved. I miss that. There is sadness in these snapshots of the past. The writing slowly fading, the paper softened by time. These fleeting glimpses of love felt, buried, lost. And there is joy. These were my people. This was my life. Though I would never want to live through it again, I realized I wouldn't want to change a thing.
I have two short pieces pieces too. The first one is called My Birth. My mother told me on the day I was born, she didn't know how to be a mother. She got pregnant by accident, I'm quite sure, detective that I am. Here is my evidence. She was in a new country, England. She was a refugee from Austria, her first time away from home. She was free. Her brother and sister were with her. She had a group of friends from Vienna. All had escaped. They were all close. Those left behind were killed by the Nazis. It's not a new story. We know this story. Her grief was profound. She chose to be happy. That was her nature. It carried her through. She slept in the underground during the Blitz. My father was her boyfriend from Poland. She said he was so handsome, and he was, dapper. He had many girlfriends. He and my mother went dancing in the evenings. She worked as a nanny and a seamstress. Her parents got shot in a trench. She buried her grief. She chose to move forward. She liked being free. Her sister got pregnant. My mother was mad. "Don't keep the baby," she said. "It isn't done. It isn't proper." Then my cousin was born. All was forgiven. 7 years later, my mother got pregnant. "It was time," she said. She was older by then. She'd had many abortions. That's what they did. And it was me being born. So she married my father 2 months later. They never told me that. I found out. Detective that I am. I said, "Why did you never tell me?" She said, "You never asked." My father was in his 40s. They thought it was time. And when I was born in Paddington Hospital, my mother didn't know the first thing to do. You see, in Vienna, things were different back then. When my mother was born, she had a wet nurse who fed her, milk from her own breast. My grandmother went to work. She managed a department store till the Nazis took over. My mother, as a baby, wasn't allowed to be touched. They didn't want germs, so they left her alone. They didn't know what to do, so nobody held her, except maybe the wet nurse, but not for too long. So when I was born in Paddington Hospital, my mother didn't know the first thing to do. She stuffed my clothes with cotton so I wouldn't get cold. I was probably sweltering and possibly suffocating. An old woman next door helped her learn what to do with this odd little creature who came out of her womb. My mother was anxious and nervous and hovered around. She fed me and loved me and did what she could. She held me and washed me and stuffed me with cotton. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was warm. I was hot. She loved me with all her heart. She did the best she could. And there I was, stuffed with cotton, loving her with all my soul. The next one is a short poem that rhymes called What Love Is. My love is not simple or brief, not neat or succinct. My love is exuberant, extravagant, shiny and bright pink. My love is messy and frivolous, profound and wacky, and sometimes filled with hate. My love is spewing forth projectile, and sometimes it can't wait. My love is blood red, filled with passion, fervor, anger, and rage. My love is grand, elaborate, a bright beam of light like on a Broadway stage. My love is erratic, impulsive, and strange, and running like a stream. My love is like a hot, dark cup of coffee with only the finest cream. My love is jumping like a jackrabbit, an antelope, a kangaroo. My love is wanting and needing and pushing away you and you and you. My love is hopeful, naive, and bursting with tomfoolery and joy. My love is coastal, galactical, poetic, and pure. My love is not a toy, nor is it a ploy. It's prayerful and grateful and funny and fierce. It's right on target like Cupid's pierce. My love is always and forever in front of you, runs circles around you, and is true blue. What are we gonna do? I haven't got a clue. It's sort of like the flu. Love is in the air. Yes, yes, love is everywhere.
My mother was diagnosed with an encapsulated tumor in her kidney when she was 48 years old. It was 1963. She seemed old then, but I know better now. The good news was they were able to remove the tumor and she was cancer-free with no chemotherapy or radiation needed. Everyone reacts differently to cancer. For my mother, it became a waiting game. Waiting for the next diagnosis of cancer, just waiting. She retreated into herself and held her breath. She stopped working, teaching kindergarten, a job she loved. She always say, "I do this for free, but don't tell anyone." 2 years later, my father got a job offer 3,000 miles away, and they moved to California. It came, of course, 16 years later. The second encapsulated tumor in the same spot. But not the kidney, because that had been removed the first time. The doctor wanted to write about this in a medical journal. She was 64 years old. I found out about the second one while I was on vacation in Cape Cod. On the phone, they said, "We've had some excitement here." My mother. And then she proceeded to tell me that she'd been already operated on and all was well. "Not so bad if I get this every 16 years, she joked. I laughed. What else could I do? The final and most devastating diagnosis came just before her 75th birthday. This time, they told me beforehand that she was going into the hospital. The doctors had started to operate on my mother, but found that the cancer had metastasized and the operation ceased. Diagnosis, inoperable cancer. I cried when she told me and made plans to fly out to visit her and talk to her doctor. My parents and I had strengthened the child bond, the parent-child bond in a way that only addicts can once they've forgiven each other for the junk piles of the past. There was no doubt I'd be helping with her care. During my second visit that fall, my mother and I talked about what to do. We never mentioned the word death or dying, but we did talk about quality of life issues. Radiation treatments for her were probably going to be ineffective, and she had a morphine pump keeping her pain-free. Her doctor was not willing to give a definite prognosis, and she had anywhere from a month to a year to live. I thought that she was very brave not to have any treatment. Before I left to fly home, my father told me that my parents had agreed on no major medical interventions for my mother and for her to be home. They had already contacted a home hospice program. I knew I would be back. In Ithaca, I read books about end-of-life issues and how to be a caretaker. I got the call on New Year's Day, 1991. I was using my uncle's frequent flyer miles and could fly at any time. I was fortunate that I had an understanding boss and was able to take work with me. I said I would be back home in 3 weeks, but I didn't know. I left my boyfriend and my cat to take care of each other, and on January 3rd, 1991, I flew to California. I embarked on the hardest and the best thing I've ever done. It felt fitting to care for my mother at the end of her life in a similar way that she cared for me at birth. Through the hospice program, my mother was cared for during the day by home health aides, nurses, volunteers, my father, and me. Many of the nurses who came to the home had been students of my father, the biochemist professor. They were kind, caring, and loving to all of us. At first I thought it was because they knew and admired my father, but I realized later that they worked in a hospice program because of the kind of people they were. This is an excerpt from my diary, January 6, 1991. I'm sitting in my parents' guest room listening to my mother's breathing through the baby monitor. This is my night to help my mother when she calls. My father and I are trying to take every other night so we can get some sleep. My mother's breathing sounds come over the monitor, and they're very reassuring. It means that she's still alive, and it brings back that primal heartbeat I must know from being in her womb. She is dying. My mother has kidney cancer. She was diagnosed in August of last year and is now bedridden. She is skin and bones. I can get an idea of how the Holocaust survivors must have looked to their liberators. But this is now, and she is my mother, a survivor of the Great Depression, with a distant mother of her own, the birth of two babies very close together, the New Jersey suburbs in the 1950s, the frustration of being an unpublished writer, and 2 bouts of cancer. I've never done anything like this in my life. I've never taken care of a helpless being in need. I've never taken physical care of my mother. I've never held my father in my arms as he wept for my mother. What I'm doing is very mature and grown up. My father said that he's too old to be going through this, and I said I was just old enough and mature enough to be of help. The end of the journey. My father and I got very little sleep as we met her needs day and night. It was an act of blood for both of us. On the 10th day of almost no sleep, I told my father we would have to get someone to come in at night, but he didn't want anyone else caring for his wife of 50 years. On the 11th evening of my stay, at 8:45 p.m., my mother took her last breaths as my father and I each held one of her frail hands. I stroked her head and told her it was all right to let go. That was 1991. In 2001, 10 years later, I was using the crossword dictionary book that I inherited from my mother and came upon her precise and neat handwriting, adding information that the book didn't have. I rubbed my forefinger over the writing, as if I was a genie rubbing a bottle, and my mother would appear if I said the right magical words.